this is Don Stradley, and I'm here with Jennifer Churchill. We're doing the Film Detective Focus, and Jennifer has become a bit of a phenomenon around the Film Detective. She's involved in all sorts of projects. I want to start talking about your book. Tell us about your book that came out a while ago. How did it come to be? What's it all about?
2018, Movies Are Magic, and it has this really long subtitle. I'll show it to you. The subtitle is A Kid's History of the Moving Image from the Dawn of Time to about 1939.
Hold it up so we can get a good look at it.
Okay.
Okay.
And the Film Detective will be partnering with me to release the director's cut of this. We're adding some more stuff to it and a teacher's guide that will be added to the back that will be coming out soon. So it'll be even cooler than this. But the reason I gave it that long-winded subtitle was because, and the reason I had it end in 1939 was that was when the big blockbuster successful color movies came out, Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz. And so I was able to touch on all the major developments of the history of film from the beginning of time. Storytelling. I kind of started out talking about how storytelling itself has been important to humans since humans have been around with, cave drawings and the development of language. And then I even mentioned the invention of the printing press. And I sort of skip through those things briefly and then start talking about the invention of series motion photography, and vaudeville shows and light shows and flip books, and just how movies came to be, because I wish kids today knew more where the videos and games and streaming things they're watching on their smartphones and devices. I wish they had a little bit more awareness and knowledge of the history of the invention of film. And there's a lot of cool STEM stuff in there too, once teachers get exposed to it and realize it's not just about the history of the movies and talking about Casablanca and how cool Humphrey Bogart is and all that stuff. There's actual scientific advancements and cool stuff embedded into the whole history of film. So
you take them from the darkness of the caves to the darkness of the movie theater.
Yes, it's just what does she say in Sunset Boulevard? All you wonderful people out there in the dark.
Well, tell me, how did you become such a movie buff?
I think I'm no Shirley MacLaine, but if there is such a thing as reincarnation, I swear I must have lived at the end of the 20s and into the mid 30s, because since I was 10 years old, that era of film, it would be on PBS on Sunday afternoon growing up, before TCM, before streaming, before there was access to classic movies. They would show up once in a while on a Sunday afternoon on TV, and I would just be drawn to it. And my mom would tell me, oh, that's Katharine Hepburn and that's Cary Grant. She was my Google and my TCM and my Film Detective all wrapped into one. And she knew who everybody was and would tell me, even the gossip and all of that. So anyway, so I just grew up loving, I love the snappy dialogue. I love the clothes they wear. I love the music, big band music. And so I've just always been drawn to that era. And then the films that I saw when I was a kid, and I don't know, the Academy Awards and all the glitz and glamour of Hollywood and the history of it was a fun thing in our family that the women in my family sort of had in common. My grandma, my mom, my Aunt Michelle, we loved the Academy Awards. I got to stay up late, and I grew up in Michigan, so the Academy Awards end at midnight. So I'd have permission to not go to school on Monday. it was just it was our Super Bowl. So I had that, which was sort of a family thing. And then when I went to college, I went to Aquinas College in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's a private liberal arts college. And one of my professors, Dr. Andrew Jeffchek, who has passed away, he was a film historian. He was a film critic for the Grand Rapids Press for decades. So he was well known in the state. And I ended up being his research assistant when I was in college, and got exposed to, like, he would send me down to the library to get these old film reels. And then my assignment would be to watch an old movie and make note of every time somebody smokes. And, he would be doing some sort of research project on smoking in old movies. And I never knew the end result, really. I would just be doing my little piece. But that was the first time I realized the study of film, or film itself, could be any sort of academic pursuit. It was just, there was no film schools in Michigan at the time, or that I knew about, or even, any sort of trajectory of studying film or getting a degree in film or anything of that nature. So it was all just sort of a revelation to me that you could be academic about it. And then I was a journalist for years and years before I went into doing PR stuff for a living. And I would always force myself to be the film reviewer. I would be like, you need someone writing film reviews in this little podunk newspaper or wherever I worked. And so I would end up being on movie sets, and I was like the self-designated, film person. And I would write film reviews and go make deals with the local movie theater to get a free pass for the year so I could write film reviews and go see as many movies as I wanted. So I've just loved movies. I love all sorts of movies, but I just particularly love the classics, and especially movies. I love silent films, and I love movies through the early 40s. Those are my favorite decades.
Well, I can certainly relate to a lot of what you're saying. I remember when I was a kid, you had one TV in the house,
Mm-hmm.
and 3 or 4 channels. And if you came home from school, or you were just kind of bumming around the house on a Saturday afternoon, you'd turn on the TV, and 50% of the time there'd be an old movie that would come on.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was a kid, I got to know John Wayne movies, and Jimmy Cagney and Fred Astaire, and I liked the old horror movies. So I got to know Boris Karloff, and just as your parents did, my mother would say, "Oh yeah, that's Boris." She would sort of introduce me to these people on the tube. And to me, they were just as relevant as Robert De Niro or John Travolta, or whoever was new and bright and shiny in Hollywood in that period. To me, John Wayne and Boris Karloff were every bit as vital and important, because I saw them all the time on TV.
Yeah. And
So
nobody was more handsome than Cary Grant. I didn't care how new or
oh sure,
shiny they were. And
I remember seeing old Jack Lemmon movies and thinking they were great. But seems like as time progressed, those older movies became marginalized, and you would only see them if you were some sort of film scholar. The average person didn't really check them out. You only saw Citizen Kane if you were studying film.
You're being tortured. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. You would only see these old movies if you were sort of fanatical about them. And I never considered myself a real movie fanatic. I thought of myself as just a regular guy who watched a lot of movies. It was not that big a deal. Mm-hmm. But you find yourself realizing, wow, I really like the old ones better than the more contemporary things. Now, it seems like kids in the last 10 or 20 years, I would say, children's programming almost made it impossible for kids to just stumble across an old movie the way you and I might have. Nowadays, if a kid turns on the TV, he probably goes directly to, the Disney Channel or SpongeBob or whatever is being, marketed to kids. He's not going to see Red River with John Wayne. He's not going to see anything like that, probably.
Unless your
Uh,
mom turns it on and forces you to watch it, like I do.
yeah, and
My 7-year-old.
yeah, like I said, we had one TV. If my father was watching an old Western, well, that's what I watched that day. That was it. I didn't get to go to my room and watch something else. I kind of, picked up the tastes of my mom and dad. So now the kids are less likely to see these old movies.
Mhm.
Uh, do you think they're missing out on a big part of the culture?
Oh, absolutely. And even there's, movie maker people who make movies, they're aware of these movies, and there'll be references, cute little references, and like Pixar movies. I can't think of a specific thing, but you might hear someone talk in a Humphrey Bogart voice for a second.
If I loved you 1,000 times more than you say you love me, it still wouldn't make any difference. I've got to have money. Doctor's orders are that I must have a lot of money. Otherwise, I become dull, listless, and have trouble with my complexion.
They don't get the joke. And to me, and the reason I probably didn't really answer your question about why I wrote the book, because I want kids to understand there is a linear connection. And when they're seeing all these special effects in a movie, the guys who made those special effects are probably very aware of King Kong from 1933 and they study that, and it informs the work they do now. And they might even pay homage to it and make little references, and it's all connected. And I don't think they need to be siloed. And I think just because it's filmed in black and white, I mean, there are new films filmed in black and white because the director decides they like that style or that look. And I just think, I don't remember who said it. Maybe, I don't know who said it. You might know, some sort of paraphrase quote that it's no movie's old if you've never seen it, or it's not an old movie if you've never seen it. And I think that was maybe Lauren Bacall said it, I think, but I think that's true. I think it's an art form, and you could never see every movie ever made. And I just think people are missing out. I love one of the things that I like about having, I'll say, old movies on, like especially with my 7-year-old in the room, is the pacing is so much different. It's long shots of people just having a conversation without even any music in the background. There's not very many explosions. It's dialogue driven and character driven, and I don't know, it doesn't, they don't edit as much. Anything new is just like edit, cut. And kids are just, their attention's all over the place. Older movies are just, they're a little slower in a good way. And I think they're more engaging. They're a little more sophisticated. And I feel like it helps his vocabulary. I feel like it's not this, doesn't give them that ADHD kind of, where their attention's just jumping from thing to thing to thing. Even shows that are educational shows for kids. There's one my son's been watching where he learns about people from history, and it's very cute. But it's it jumps all over the place. It's just like all over the place, and they can't just stop and pause and tell a story. And I feel like that's good for young minds. to not always be jumping around all over the place.
Tell me about some of the reactions you get when you, I know you show a lot of old movies to your son.
Mm-hmm.
What's that like? What are the movies that he really responds to?
When he was 2, he loved Top Hat with Fred Astaire. Loved it because he was the tap dancing would just capture his attention, the singing, the dancing, and it was fun for him when he was that little. I tried not to have him be around screens too much when he was that little, but I'd let him watch a few classic movies here and there. He loved that. I even bought him some little tap shoes, and he would like copy Fred Astaire and kind of tap around in the living room in front of the, actually know how to tap dance, but he had the little clicky shoes on, and he would watch Fred Astaire. And so that was super fun. And he loves Buster Keaton. He's loved Buster Keaton since he was that age, and he still loves Buster Keaton. He'll do a somersault off the couch and flip and land, and he's like, Mom, look, I'm Buster Keaton. So that makes my heart happy that he loves Buster as much as I do. And so I think the silent films are really engaging for kids. It's like watching a cartoon. There's a lot of physical comedy and banging on the head and, silly stunts, and kids love that. It's like watching a cartoon. And the ways I get him interested in the movies, I sort of want to foist upon him or I just want to watch it and I want him to sort of be interested while I'm watching it. One example is I put Casablanca on and he was like, oh, Mom, I don't want to watch. This looks like a boring girl. I don't want to watch this movie. And I just had it on. I said, let's just give it a chance. And when he hides the letters of transit in the piano, in Sam's piano, and the whole movie, they're looking for the letters of transit. I just pointed that out to him. I said, watch, he's going to hide these letters of transit in the piano and everyone's going to be looking for them the whole movie. And he just totally got into that. Every time someone went into what's Rick's, every time someone went in there, Weston's like, they don't know the letters of transit. He was just all about the letters of transit. So I think you can find a little hook that might sort of get them into it and watch it with you. And he watched the movie all the way to the end. Usually he'll watch, chunks of it, or I can draw his attention to a funny scene that I know is coming up. And I'm like, oh, Weston, you have to watch this, Arsenic and Old Lace. Movies like that are fun for kids. And especially when there's, tripping over couches and little, it depends on the age of your child and what you're comfortable exposing them to. But there's not very much in old movies that people can find, offensive for kids to watch. It's mostly, silly humor and physical comedy and that sort of thing.
It's really interesting that he took a liking to Fred Astaire and tap dancing, because I remember that when I was very, very, very small. I was 6, 7 years old. I was fascinated by Fred Astaire, the movies where Jimmy Cagney danced.
Oh yeah, he was a great dancer too.
And in a way, it was like they were flying, so they were almost like they had these kind of superpowers where they could take off, especially Cagney when he was, gliding downstairs and up the sides of walls, and so it's interesting that your son picked up on that too. I didn't start following Buster Keaton until I was a bit older. I was already an adult, and there was a film festival. I think it was in Cambridge. In Harvard Square, there was a Buster Keaton festival, and I had read about him, and I knew I wanted to see some of those movies because they weren't on TV at that time. And I was fascinated by Keaton too, and I think for a similar reason. He was almost like a little superhero who could take flight, running after trains and hurricanes, and he was like a little heroic figure that really fascinating to me.
Breaking his neck, breaking bones.
Yeah, he fell off a train one time and broke his neck, didn't he? Yeah.
He amazes me. And then when you learn about him and see interviews with him when he's older, he was so humble. I mean, that's the impression I get. Obviously, I didn't know him, but he's like, he was just a genius, and it was just who he was. And I don't know. I get really like sad when I think about the years when he was alive and he was forgotten. It makes me so sad because I'm like, oh my God, he was such a genius, and he was so funny, and he was so talented. And, there was a few decades there where he was a nobody, and then he got rediscovered, thankfully. But I don't know.
He was doing a lot of those shorts that were hit or miss. He doing a lot of he'd always be named Elmer or something in these short films. I could never match his voice to the way I thought of Buster Keaton. in the silent films. You know, he was this sort of a mysterious little character with these big eyes, and this kind of classic profile. But then when he talked, he sounded like a farmer.
Yeah, that's true.
The voice never matched him, I
He
thought.
did sound like a farmer. That's it. I sound like my Uncle Johnny. That's true.
Yeah, the voice never matched him.
Yeah.
And
He spent his summers in Muskegon, Michigan, and I grew up in Michigan. So I've been to the house he spent his summers in, that supposedly is the house where Houdini gave him the name Buster. That's the story, is that so some other people live there, and I just sort of like lurked outside staring at it for a while. I'm like, oh my gosh, Buster lived here. That's where they have the International Buster Keaton Society Festival every year.
Really?
Muskegon, Michigan. Old town.
Yeah, I like I like him when he's dressed up, when he's in a tuxedo with a top hat. That's I always like him in those kind of roles, when he gets to kind of mix with the wealthy people and then fall down a flight of stairs or something. I always like that.
And you talk about like we were talking about the connections to more modern films. I see Johnny Depp, channeling Buster Keaton all the time. I saw that movie Benny and June. I might have in the 80s or 90s, but he was doing sort of like a mix of Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton in that character. It's not like a great film, but I thought he was really good in it, and it's fun to watch that, and being aware of who Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin are, and watch that, and you're like, oh yeah, he's totally being Buster Keaton right now. And so you'll see actors sort of using things they've seen in these old movies, and it's cool to recognize it, to know the old films, and to recognize what people are doing in modern film that's connected to those movies. And if you've never seen these, then you don't see that, you won't recognize that.
And Buster was also really groundbreaking as a director, as a filmmaker. And I think sometimes people overlook that. They just think of him as the stuntman, but he was actually a groundbreaking filmmaker with a lot of the techniques he used, weird little special effects, double images. There was one movie where you saw him as 5 or 6 different characters.
Oh yeah.
Sherlock Jr. It was called Sherlock Jr.
Mm-hmm.
He was really ahead of his time, just with the stuff he did with the camera. And that always makes me sad, because he probably had more things he wanted to try with the technology, because all of that stuff was new.
Yeah.
And he was just, he didn't even know what doors he was breaking down.
Right.
What boundaries he was setting. He was just a young guy having fun with this new technology. But he kind of drank his way out of a few jobs. And he also had trouble with just some of the movies. They just stopped making money, so he lost his contract, his production company.
Yeah, he ended up when he went, I think it was MGM he went to, and then he just sort of they took away his directorial power, and
they just kind of
is good.
They started using him as just an actor for hire.
Yeah.
And pairing him up with Jimmy Durante and doing a lot of weird things, which just makes you think they didn't really know what they had.
Yeah.
Guy,
Yeah.
Now, so you told me about your son and how he reacts to movies. Have you had a chance to introduce old films to other kids, or how has that gone? Anything like that?
Yeah. We've done a few, before pre-pandemic, I would introduce like some kid-friendly movies, at the local theater. And usually it's tied in, you have to lure them with like something else, like, oh, it's a fundraiser for something and we're going to show this movie. So I always find ways to foist movies. I did one of those. It was like a fundraiser, and we showed A Night at the Opera, Marx Brothers. And so the movie never is the draw when I do those kinds of things, but then often I've done an introduction and there's a lot of kids in the audience, And you can tell they're like, well, I don't know what I'm about to see. And then, the payoff is when you just hear them all laughing out loud. And that's what I wish a lot of people, families and, grownups who have the opportunity to expose kids to these films, is the kids might resist because it's unfamiliar, but if you just put it on, usually they like it. So I feel like, sometimes there's a resistance because, like you said, there's the things they've been marketed and that they know and they hear the names of, and I want to watch this and this and this. And they've never heard of the Marx Brothers, but if you put it on, they just start laughing. So that's the experience I've had, and it makes me so happy, where I'm like, they still get it. It's still funny.
Yeah, there's nothing better than that, to be in a movie theater and someone does a gag that's 50 years old and it still gets a laugh.
Yeah. And I wish there's some way those, Buster Keaton or the Marx Brothers could hear it. Like, oh, I wish they knew that they're still funny, 100 years later.
Oh yeah, well, I think Harpo Marx will always be funny to kids. You could show Harpo Marx to a kid 100 years from now, and he'd probably still get a laugh.
Right home, right home. Help! Help! I have found my toe! Help! Linus, more Marx little beautiful man. Where's my tongue? Where's my tongue? Thank you, sir. You cut off my... You cut off my coat. Why did you cut off?
Yeah.
Hey, I know you've been doing a lot of other things for the Film Detective. I know you did a commentary for one of our Blu-rays, I believe. Tell us about that.
I've done 4 now.
Okay, all right.
Believe it.
I know you did the Dancing Pirate.
Yes. And that one was so fun. 1936. Charles Collins, who's like unknown. So I did tons of research into him, and I feel like someone needs to write his biography, because he's just unknown and he was super talented. I would say almost, Fred Astaire level almost in a few scenes. He was on Broadway. He was more successful on Broadway, and this was like really his only movie. And I guess he just didn't make the cut. I dug up old film reviews, and they said he was too skinny. I'm like, Fred Astaire was skinny. So I don't know. He was handsome. He was an amazing dancer. It's Technicolor, super fun to watch. And the dancing Cansinos are in the film, doing several dance sequences, which was Rita Hayworth's dad's dance troupe that she was a part of. So she's in the film. I paused and rewatched and paused and tried to find Rita's face in the group of the dancing Cansinos, and I'm like, I think that one's her. I'm not sure. She definitely is in the film, but she doesn't get a credit. Obviously, she wasn't Rita Hayworth. Yes, she was, I think, Marguerite Cansino, or whatever her name was at the time. But anyway, so it's fun to just know those little factoids and try and look for the spot where you see her. So yeah, that was really, really fun. You have to do a lot of research ahead of time, because when you go into the studio, and I don't know if you want to hear about this part, but it's kind of fun.
Sure.
You've done it, but you do a lot of research, and then you watch the film and you've got all your notes written out, and I would put the timestamp, like at this point in the film, I want to talk about this and talk about that. And then you sit there and you watch the film with the headphones on, and only you can hear the movie, but I was in the studio recording into the microphone. So it's sort of a strange experience. And it's hard for me as a classic film fan to like talk over the whole movie. I'm like, I just want to watch it. But so hopefully I've had a few people like friends that I let, hear the commentary, and they're like, oh, it made the movie better. I'm like, okay, well, that's the point. So that's good.
California, Vergelsin, igual de Rosales California, preciosa sultana.
So watching this dance with our leading lady, I think she should be giving him dance lessons. I love the castanets she incorporates into her dance. Castanets, which most people know, are pairs of, they were like little shell-shaped clappers, or they are shell-shaped clappers that are hinged together with string. And it was a traditional Spanish dance for the dancer to hold a pair in each hand and then click the clappers together to accompany their dance movements. And I did The Fabulous Dorseys from 1947 about the Dorsey brothers, which was the actual Dorsey brothers play themselves, and the music's amazing, and it's sort of intriguing and fun to see them trying to act. And it's just awesome music throughout the whole movie. So that's a good one just to have on while you're cleaning the house or doing whatever. And then I did one of the Sherlock Holmes from the box set that came out over the holidays. I did the audio for The Fatal Hour. And then I did one that is not a kid-friendly film at all, Girl on a Chain Gang from 1966. Jerry Gross, who also produced I Spit on Your Grave. So, and it's funny because just speaking of inappropriate films for kids that are classic movies. An
older kid. It'll be appropriate for an older kid.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's not that terrible, but it's pretty heavy subject matter. But one of my favorite genres of movies is pre-code films. And obviously I do not let my son watch pre-code movies. And I don't even talk about pre-codes in my children's book because they're just not appropriate for kids, which is why they're fun and good movies. They're racy and there's nudity, which I did let my son watch one of the Tarzan movies, and you see Jane swimming naked, and that was very racy in the early 30s. But pre-codes would probably be the one category of classic films that I wouldn't necessarily encourage grown-ups to to watch with kids.
Well, Jennifer, that's why they brought out the code.
Exactly. Hey, I'm okay.
I'm showing that stuff.
That's true. Kids were just going into the 5-cent movie and seeing whatever.
Looking for Buster Keaton, and they got a naked woman swimming through the jungle.
Scandalous.
So now I also heard that you're working on some kind of a show, some kind of a program that will be part of the Film Detective. Tell us a little about that. Some kind of, get our appetite whetted for that.
Yes, I'm super, super excited. Weston, my 7-year-old, and I are co-hosting a show called Classic Films for Kids, presented by the Film Detective. I think that's how we say the full title. And the Film Detective team came to Sonoma, where we live, in November last fall, and we spent several days filming, all day, several days. Weston's grandmother was on set, thankfully, and she was the official kid wrangler. So, she would take him out to play, and then, okay, grandma, we need him. And he did great. He would memorize his short lines and stand on his mark, and it was very impressive. But what we did was pull together 10 films. There's going to be 10 episodes that I think one will run one per week once they start airing. I think, I'm not sure. Sometime we'll say spring 2022. So soon they will start. It's family friendly. We showcase a lot of classic films, some that are well known, some that are not. We have a Buster Keaton movie, Steamboat Bill Jr., The Jungle Book from 1942. The Kid, Charlie Chaplin's 1921 silent film classic, a Shirley Temple movie, Gulliver's Travels from 1939. So just a mix of different kinds of movies. And Weston and I do a brief, 2 to 5 minute intro where we talk about the movie. And then they'll show the film, and then we do an outro that's at the end of the film where we sort of wrap it up and talk about it. And we used a few props. We kind of dressed in character a little bit a few times and had some fun with it. So we're super excited and hope that this is just a fun way for people to introduce kids to classic movies that kind of packages it up for them so they can, just turn it on, and we can make it fun and get them interested in the movie that's about to be shown. Hopefully they watch the film and enjoy it, and then we have a little outro at the end.
Well, that sounds great. I'll look forward to seeing that. We've given them about a half hour of Q&A. I think we're done. What do you think? Anything else you wanted to discuss while we have?
I feel like I should tell you one more thing related to the show. So the Classic Films for Kids show, the Steamboat Bill Jr., Buster Keaton movie that we introduced, I happen to have met and live nearby Buster Keaton's granddaughter, Melissa Talmadge Cox is her name. And I'd met her at a screening of The Great Buster a few years ago. And so she loaned us for the film, for the intro that we filmed, she loaned us one of Buster Keaton's actual pork pie hats that's like greasy and has a hole in it. And he wore it in his movies, and she just has it and she let us borrow it. So
did you wear it?
There's a picture of me wearing it, but my son wears it in the intro, I think, and then we have it on the set with us when we intro the film. We treated it very delicately, but we did each wear it for like a few minutes each with her permission. So that's just sort of a cool thing that I wanted to share.
That is cool. And unfortunately you had to give the hat back.
Oh, I didn't want to.
Oh, you still have it?
No, I had it for a couple of weeks, and I messaged her. She lives about an hour away, and I emailed her and I said, I'll bring you the hat. And she's like, oh, no rush. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll bring it next weekend. And then I was just like sitting in my living room, and I'm like, oh, I have to give it back to her. But it made me happy to have it in my house.
Well, a little piece of movie history, a little piece of Buster.
A little piece of Buster. I touched something he touched. I can die.
Wow, happy. I know, that's interesting. And it was still in pretty good shape, or was it? How old was it? It's 100 years old.
100 years old. Yeah, it had like kind of his like hair, kind of greasy, a little on the inside, and there's a little hole in the top. So you kind of held it delicately.
Oh yeah.
His head was so little because it's so small. It was.
He was a little guy. Yeah.
It like perched on my head, like it's not like I could pull it down and fit it over my big head.
Right. And all the men slicked their hair back then too. They put a lot of greasy stuff in their hair back then. So
homemade. Yeah, I think I made stains on it. But yeah,
it all looks like Rudolph Valentino with that slicked back look, So wow, well, that's great. We'll see that hat. I'm Don Stradley. This is Jennifer Churchill on the other side of the screen. Jennifer, thanks for talking to us. We'll look forward to all of your future work at the Film Detective.
Thanks, Don. It was fun.